under these circumstances. And in a contemporary sense, I think we've lost this, right? We've lost the sentiment, right? There is a sense in which if you have, and I got to be careful how I say this, but it's true, if there's too much reverence for the law, if there's too much humility for the law, if there is a complete inability by the population that is governed by the law to identify aspects of the legal code which unfairly, which unfairly incarcerate, which unfairly prosecute, which unfairly condemn members of the population, and there isn't the strategic attempt to transform those aspects of the law, I mean, you then have, an industry of incarceration then. Because the people aren't fighting against this. It seems like the people are playing along. Right? And insofar as the people are playing along and the industry is being buttressed by their apathetic... Jason. It's just the worst when you think about it. And you get deep and then you realize, wow, I'm really deep. But at this level, it's like there's a pervasive apathy of their own, right? Excluded populations. There's a pervasive apathy of their own political plight, of their own legal plight. In the Civil Rights era, there wasn't that apathy. It's like you are not going to exclude me from representation. You are not going to increase the likelihood that I'm going to go to prison without due process, without a real representative jury. All of this stuff that has changed for African Americans primarily within the latter half of the 20th century and now the 21st century is precisely because there wasn't that level of apathy within the community. I would argue in a contemporary setting, I mean, this is going to be contentious, especially for a lot of contemporary black theorists, or I really hate that phrasing. But, I mean, the burden of proof are on those who say that there is an apathy in the urban communities, right? There seems to be a very, very high level of apathetic concern with respect to their political plight of the urban population. If it's the case, since it's the case that incarceration rates are so much higher, disproportionately higher, since it's the case that these incarceration rates are from violent crimes and murder and drugs and all of this stuff, why isn't it that there is a genuine concern within the community to transform the nature of their political plight so that those rates aren't as high as they are? I mean, that's a very, 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 very difficult question to answer. It's a very difficult question to answer. And there needs to be, I would argue, a type of educator. Unfortunately, this is not my job. I can't do it, right? I got other stuff I got to do. But there needs to be a type of educator, probably someone who has like a criminologist, PhD in criminology, to try and educate, right? Not in a paternalistic sense. That's the problem. And I don't want to go too deep. Educate members of that population with respect in mind, because that's big in the ghetto. With respect in mind, so that it's not paternalistic, so that individuals can see, quote unquote, their plight, and then hopefully internally, systematically change the nature of their plight, right? That's the idea behind civil disobedience, right? That's, for me, that's key. And again, I've wedded sort of, that would make a great paper, which I'm not going to write, but I've wedded MLK with Al-Farabi, right? In terms of civil disobedience, and the emphasis is on ethic and morality, what MLK would say. What Al-Farabi would say is justice, the just, the virtuous, versus legality and law, right? So emphasis is always on ethic and morality, not legality and law. So the key point is, and here's a quote, physical force overpowering a war is a fundamental element of the law and one of the basic preludes for establishing it. Right? The idea of law, according to Al-Farabi, and this interpretation as well, is that the very attempt to conceptualize a governance of massive people, social control, social, I wouldn't really say mobilization. Mobilization leaves law. It moves more, this is what social scientists, if they're doing their job right, really should be doing, which is what I try to do, what I'm writing on right now. But the idea is that when we talk about society, insofar as we have a political establishment that implements law, there has to be consequences. There has to be punishment. You can't. It wouldn't make sense to talk about law if there weren't consequences for an inability and failure to follow the law. It can be as trite as, which is my biggest problem, was, not anymore. I had a heavy foot when I was young. I love fast cars. I love fast cars. So it's just like, you know, I'm off on a tangent now thinking about cars. But yeah, when I was younger, you know, you're in college, okay, you know, do the speed limit. Speed limit says 75. I know I'm supposed to go 75. Unfortunately, I find myself doing 95. Boo! Boo! Right? Okay. They have to enforce the law. The law says 75 miles an hour. I was doing 95 miles an hour. If there weren't consequences for my inability to follow the law, why have it, right? So that there is a justificatory system that's needed, right? So insofar as we talk about the justification process, right? Insofar as we talk about justification, and here the prompt for me is explain justification of punishment. So justification, I need to move this marker out the way. Justification of punishment right? Insofar as we talk about the justification of punishment in no particular order, the one thing that you have to recognize, probably the primary aspect, and you can write volumes on this, right? The first thing that you have to recognize insofar as we talk about the codification of law in terms of social governance is that the people ought to know, right? You can't justifiably punish someone where individuals didn't have a full understanding of what the law was, right? It's not fair, right? So that there has to be knowledge, K-N-O-W-L, knowledge of there has to be knowledge of proper or legal expectations. What am I supposed to do? Okay, 75 miles an hour? Okay, great. Okay, something a little bit more complex. Okay, insider trading. Okay, in this state, in this case, is it really, is it not? I know there's a law. Let me find out and consult with someone who really knows. Okay, with respect to my role as, I don't know, I can't think of legal stuff right now, but, you know, conducting myself in a legal manner, I'm thinking all business examples. Or there might be a medical ethics thing. Okay, so, you know, this new president comes into power, I can no longer use this particular type of scientific experiment because it might be rendered illegal. What can I do in the interim, blah, 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 because of the law, so on and so forth. In the insurance debate now, contemporarily, this act that we're currently doing is legal, but we recognize that it might be illegal in the future. What do we do, blah, blah, blah. Right? There has to be, in order to punish, there has to be a knowledge of the expectation, right? So that if the population recognizes the role of conduct that is expected by the law, that is demanded by the law, then punishment is justified, right? So that we can talk about justified punishment. Right? We can say that justified punishment always occurs where there was knowledge of proper conduct, right? Where the particular individual had knowledge of the expectation, right? But we also recognize in the contemporary sense that, you know, ignorance is not an excuse, right? So that you ought to actively seek, right? And this is the point, right? You ought to actively seek the proper mode of conduct whenever you're unsure. If there's any problem, well, before I move on, obviously, number 3 is unjustified punishment. Right? Unjustified punishment occurs when the individual doesn't have, and it's funny because I'm actually, and I can't really talk in any detail about this, but I'm actually going through this with another person, not in a legal setting, but individual expects X, whatever X might be, and she's in a position where she ought to make that expectation. Out of the middle of nowhere, The rules change.